I want to address something that I've been hearing a lot since my last video on racism, colorism, and classism. Many people have commented that racism isn't really an issue here in Puerto Rico because people respect one another. But here's the truth. One, respect is subjective. Two, racism isn't even about respect. It's about access. Access to resources, infrastructure, aid, and a decent quality of life. As an African American living here, I've been looking closely at how this plays out, especially in Black communities like Loíza. Not saying that Puerto Rico in itself does not have struggles, but I do notice a disenfranchisement of people who live in what are considered Black communities. And I want to share some examples of how systematic racism isn't about how we treat each other day to day, but about who is left behind when resources are distributed. Hi, my name is Jade, and welcome to Get Into the Black, where we explore life, business, and culture our way, from Puerto Rico to the world. And quick side note, I'm also an Airbnb host here in Puerto Rico. So if you're planning a trip, I'd love to host you. You can find the booking link right in the description box. Before we get into this video, go ahead and hit that like button like it owes you money. Drop a comment so I know you're awake and subscribe because why be a hater watching for free? Support the cause. Respect is a social thing. It's about kindness, words, or attitude. But racism? Racism is structural. It shows up when two communities face the same disaster and one gets what it needs while the other waits for months or years. It's the straight up haves versus the have nots. And here's something a lot of people miss. Racism didn't begin in America. Racism is a European invention. It was created by colonizers as a way to control the native people and enslaved Africans by limiting their access to land, wealth, and resources. America may have taken racism to an extreme, but it's not just about hate, it's about power and control. People didn't lose their homes or lives because someone just didn't like them. They lost them because systems of racism denied them equal access. And that's what happened in Puerto Rico. Black communities, especially Loíza, were devastated by Hurricane Maria in 2017 and again by Fiona in 2022. They weren't just hurt by the storms, they were hurt by the delays and denials that followed. Loíza is a town that is often called the cultural heart of Afro-Puerto Rican identity. About 37% of its residents identify as Black, compared to just 8% for the island overall. When Maria hit, Loíza was flooded and homes were devastated. They were destroyed. But FEMA's aid was uneven. Many residents were denied housing assistance because they couldn't provide formal property titles, even though their families had lived on that land for generations. One report found FEMA denied around 60% of housing applications across Puerto Rico, and Loíza was hit especially hard. Thousands of Black families were left without help simply because of paperwork. And it wasn't just paperwork. Supplies were here on the island. Millions of bottles of water were sitting on an airstrip in Ceiba, but communities like Loíza weren't receiving them. Think about that. Families were thirsty, desperate, and the aid was literally locked away. This isn't about respect. This is about a Black town being systematically locked out of the resources needed to rebuild. After Maria, some communities had power and bridges restored within weeks. Loíza waited months, sometimes years. Families were cut off, children couldn't even get to school, and elders couldn't reach hospitals. The Guardian reported that even months after Maria, thousands of homes across Puerto Rico were still covered with blue tarps. In towns like Loíza, those tarps weren't temporary. They became semi-permanent. Families lived under them through storms and floods for time and months to follow. That delay is deadly. Researchers link delays in restoring power and infrastructure to thousands of excess deaths, and Black communities bore a disproportionate share. Again, that's not about people respecting you. That's racism denying you equal access to safety, a great quality of life, and man, just the ability to breathe again. And I want to make this clear that Puerto Rico as a whole, due to colonial powers, lack infrastructure and resources. But when times like this happen, that is when racism becomes even more deadly for Black communities here in Puerto Rico. I'm not saying that we could probably just like, magically wave a wand and all the issues here in Puerto Rico are going to go away. But what I'm saying is let us come together as a community and acknowledge the racism that is present so that these people have a better shot at living. And it's important to say, Loíza didn't suddenly become vulnerable after Maria. This is a town that has been historically underfunded, underdeveloped, and neglected. Racism in Puerto Rico isn't always loud, it's quiet. It's in which neighborhoods have reliable sewage systems, which schools are underfunded, and which towns don't get infrastructure investments until disaster strikes. But when hurricanes hit, those inequalities multiply. If you're already struggling with poverty and neglect, the disaster only makes the gap between Black communities and the rest of the island even wider. Residents have been vocal about this. One Loíza community leader told reporters, "We've been forgotten for decades. After Maria, we waited and waited. We didn't see the same urgency here as in other parts of Puerto Rico." Other residents explained that her home, passed down through generations, was denied FEMA aid because the deed wasn't in her name. We're punished for being poor, for being Black, and for living the way our families always have. And I think that's the key point here I want to highlight. Living the way our families always have. Because when I tell you there are some things that are in practice here in Puerto Rico that people just do that might not be the legal thing to do, but it is the thing that they do. And I think it's important when there are structural systems like FEMA to acknowledge that maybe the way that you do it in the States, you can't do it here because the way that they do it here is just different. These stories remind us racism isn't always someone calling you a name. It's about whether your community gets the bridge rebuilt, the hospital reopened, the school gets funding, or the roof fixed. And for Loíza, the answer too often has been no. But here's what I love about Loíza. They didn't just wait for help. No, no, no. They came together. Grassroots groups set up kitchens, distributed water and care for neighbors. Churches and cultural centers became relief hubs. They did what they had to do. This resiliency is inspiring, but it also shows how systematic racism works. Black communities shouldn't have to save themselves every single time a disaster strikes. They should be supported equally, just like anyone else. And I say this for Puerto Rico in general. It needs to be supported. It needs to be supported. We need to care about this island, this space, just like we care about everything else that has to do with America. Because we might have a dirty, messy history on our connection, but this is also too America. Not some what he say? Island of garbage. No. And if you want to learn more about institutionalized racism in Puerto Rico, check the description box. I've shared a link to a powerful video created by Afro-Boricuas about Loíza and Hurricane Maria. That's their voice, their story, and it's important we listen. Also, check the description box for the video that kind of inspired this whole follow-up on my discussion about racism in Puerto Rico. So when people say that racism doesn't exist in Puerto Rico because people are friendly or because everyone's mixed, I want you to think of Loíza. Respect is good, but it doesn't rebuild homes. It doesn't restore power. It doesn't educate our children. And it doesn't replace roofs or bridges. Racism here is about access to resources. One Black Puerto Rican are too often denied that access. Thank you for watching and engaging with these important conversations. If you find this helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're planning on visiting Puerto Rico, I'd love to host you at my Airbnb. The link is in the description box. Until next time, this is Jade, and you're watching Get Into the Black. Bye-bye.